In 2015, the world discovered that one of the most trusted car companies had been lying, deliberately poisoning the air we breathe while claiming to save the planet. This isn't just a story about cars. It's a story about ambition, deception, and a secret buried in plain sight. Welcome to Chapter, The Lost, where we uncover the hidden truths, buried scandals, and forgotten chapters of history, one story at a time. The rise of a giant. In the heart of Germany, where precision engineering was both heritage and pride, Volkswagen stood tall, an emblem of national identity and mechanical mastery. Founded in 1937 and reborn from the ashes of war, Volkswagen, or the people's car, had grown into one of the most powerful auto empires in the world. By the early 2000s, its reputation sparkled with reliability, efficiency, and European elegance. But for all its dominance in Europe, one frontier had long eluded it: the American market. In the land of muscle cars and pickup trucks, Volkswagen struggled. The U.S. consumer didn't just want efficiency, they wanted performance, comfort, and increasingly, environmental responsibility. And as climate change began to creep into political agendas, American regulators imposed some of the strictest emission standards in the world. Volkswagen's top brass knew they needed something revolutionary. In 2007, a plan was born, codenamed internally with the zeal of a corporate moon landing. Clean diesel would be the company's spearhead, the breakthrough that would blend performance and low emissions. German engineers were tasked with the impossible: deliver fuel economy and power without exceeding nitrogen oxide, no limits that were tightening with every passing year. Leading the charge was Martin Winterkorn, a man of precision and intolerance for failure. Under his leadership, expectations became edicts. Timelines shrank. Corners were trimmed. The engineers at VW's Wolfsburg headquarters, once respected craftsmen, now found themselves under relentless pressure. The message was unspoken, yet clear: deliver results, no matter the cost. The new diesel vehicles rolled off the lines with glossy ads promising cleaner air and guilt-free driving. Commercials aired in prime time, showing happy families and lush green forests, images curated to sell an illusion. Sales soared. By 2010, Volkswagen was hailed as an environmental innovator, a pioneer in a cleaner future. And yet, behind the celebration, a crack had already formed. Engineers had quietly discovered early on that the diesel engines could not consistently meet emission standards without sacrificing power or fuel economy, two pillars of their clean diesel promise. The math didn't add up. The software didn't behave. The laws of physics themselves seemed to rebel. The solution, when it came, was presented not as fraud but as optimization. A software tweak. A calibration. Something to ensure cars passed emissions tests during regulatory checks, just long enough to roll off the lot. It wasn't a scandal yet. It was survival. And as the cars were shipped across oceans and into driveways, few at Volkswagen saw themselves as villains. They were problem solvers. The kind history celebrates, until the truth catches up. And in the shadows, far from Wolfsburg, a small team of researchers was beginning to notice something strange. Volkswagen's clean diesel cars were too good to be true. The data whispered secrets. And secrets, no matter how well engineered, don't stay buried forever. The dirty secret. Across the Atlantic, thousands of miles from Volkswagen's glistening headquarters, a group of scientists at West Virginia University were running emissions tests on diesel vehicles. It was 2014, and they'd been commissioned by the International Council on Clean Transportation, ICCT, a non-profit that wanted to validate how clean diesel engines performed under real-world conditions, not just in laboratory settings. Their mission was routine, even dull. But what they found was anything but. The tests involved 3 cars, a BMW X5 and 2 Volkswagens, a Jetta and a Passat. While the BMW hovered close to legal no-emission limits, the VWs blew past them, by factors of 15 to 40. It didn't make sense. These were the very vehicles Volkswagen had promoted as the cleanest diesels in the world. On paper, they were compliant. In reality, they were environmental time bombs. Confused, the researchers triple-checked their equipment. They ran the tests again and again. Each time, the results pointed in the same direction. The VW cars only passed emissions tests when they were on the lab's dynamometer rollers. But once on the open road, the emissions soared. It was as if the car knew it was being tested, and behaved accordingly. Back in Wolfsburg, whispers grew louder. Within Volkswagen, some engineers were already aware of the deception. They knew about the defeat device, a piece of software embedded deep in the vehicle's control module. It detected when the car was undergoing official testing and temporarily reduced emissions to legal levels. But in regular driving, the software switched modes, allowing the engine to perform better while spewing NO unchecked. This was no accident. No programming oversight. It was deliberate. Volkswagen's top management, under immense pressure to meet ambitious environmental and sales goals, had authorized the cheat years earlier. Engineers had protested. Some resigned. Others rationalized. What started as a technical workaround had metastasized into corporate policy, hidden in lines of code, buried under layers of plausible deniability. Back in the US, the ICCT published its findings, expecting VW to respond with a technical explanation, perhaps even a recall. But Volkswagen stonewalled. They blamed faulty testing methods, environmental variables, even bad fuel. Privately, engineers scrambled. They feared what might happen if the defeat device was exposed. Fines, lawsuits, criminal charges. For nearly a year, VW managed to keep the truth at bay. But regulators were growing suspicious. The California Air Resources Board, CARB, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, pressed harder. Why did the discrepancies exist? What was Volkswagen hiding? As the scrutiny intensified, the walls began to close in. VW engineers were asked to explain things they couldn't deny. Executives rehearsed denials they no longer believed. Behind closed doors, the company wrestled with a single, paralyzing question. Do we confess, or wait to be caught? The software had done its job perfectly, masking reality from the world. But reality has a way of clawing its way to the surface. And the moment of reckoning was just a few breaths away. The scandal breaks. On the morning of September 18, 2015, the truth broke through the polished veneer. The United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in coordination with the California Air Resources Board, issued a notice of violation against Volkswagen. The language was clinical, precise, and devastating. VW had intentionally programmed turbocharged direct injection, TDI, diesel engines to activate emissions controls only during laboratory testing. It was official. Volkswagen had cheated on a global scale. In Wolfsburg, silence swept through the boardrooms like a storm. Years of calculated deceit had unraveled with a single document. There was no room left to maneuver. The defeat device, once a guarded secret hidden behind software walls, was now a matter of public record. The media exploded. Headlines screamed betrayal. Volkswagen, once the darling of eco-conscious engineering, had manipulated emissions data for over 11 million vehicles worldwide. The public, furious and bewildered, wanted answers. Customers who believed they were driving clean, efficient cars now realized they had been unwitting participants in one of the largest corporate frauds in automotive history. At the center stood CEO Martin Winterkorn, once a symbol of the company's rigor and ambition. Now, under scrutiny, he appeared shaken. 5 days after the EPA's notice, on September 23, Winterkorn resigned. His departure was swift, his statement careful. He claimed ignorance of the defeat device but accepted responsibility as CEO. Behind the scenes, however, the atmosphere was pure chaos. Volkswagen's stock plummeted, nearly 40% wiped away in days. Lawsuits surged. Governments across Europe and Asia launched investigations. The U.S. Department of Justice opened a criminal inquiry. Environmental groups demanded accountability. Customers demanded refunds. The auto industry, stunned, scrambled to contain the fallout. If Volkswagen, a trusted titan, could manipulate emissions tests, who else might be cheating? Inside Volkswagen, executives scrambled to construct a narrative: rogue engineers, miscommunication, misunderstanding. But the evidence told another story. Meeting minutes, internal emails, and technical documents revealed layers of awareness and complicity stretching far beyond the software team. The scale of the betrayal was almost operatic. Environmental damage, too, wasn't abstract. The elevated nitrogen oxide emissions contributed to respiratory illnesses, acid rain, and smog. In cities already choking on pollution, The realization that these clean cars had silently poisoned the air for years stung deeply. And yet, amid the fury and disbelief, something else emerged, a global reckoning. Regulators toughened oversight. Emissions testing became stricter, with real-world driving assessments replacing lab-only evaluations. Automakers faced new scrutiny from consumers who demanded more than slogans and spin. Volkswagen, once seen as a symbol of precision and trust, was now a cautionary tale. But the story wasn't over. The company wasn't dead. In boardrooms lit by panic and strategy, new plans were being drafted. Billions were being set aside, not just for penalties, but for a reinvention. The question now wasn't whether VW could survive. It was what it would become next. Aftermath and legacy. The damage was colossal and unavoidable. In the months following the EPA's revelation, Volkswagen faced a tidal wave of financial, legal, and moral consequences. Governments imposed massive penalties. Consumers demanded buybacks. Shareholders launched class action suits. By the end of 2017, the scandal had cost Volkswagen over $30 billion in fines, settlements, and compensation. It was one of the most expensive corporate scandals in history. But it wasn't just about money. Executives were arrested. Some fled. In the United States, Oliver Schmidt, a VW manager, was sentenced to 7 years in prison. In Germany, high-level indictments loomed for top brass accused of market manipulation and criminal fraud. Internal emails and memos made clear this was no accident. This was a corporate conspiracy that had grown roots deep into the soil of the company. Public trust shattered. Diesel, once Volkswagen's proud alternative to gasoline, was now a dirty word. Sales plunged across Europe. Regulators imposed stricter emissions standards. And an entire industry was forced to reckon with its practices. Other manufacturers came under investigation. The era of easy greenwashing was over. But amidst the wreckage, Volkswagen pivoted. Faced with reputational collapse, the company made a bold and urgent decision. It would reinvent itself as a leader in electric mobility. Billions were invested in a new direction. The ID.3 and ID.4, all-electric vehicles, were announced as symbols of rebirth. VW promised carbon-neutral manufacturing, massive battery production facilities, and a clean slate. Cynics saw it as damage control. Others saw possibility. Internally, the company underwent painful reform. The Dieselgate era was dissected in public hearings and private boardrooms alike. Whistleblower protections were introduced. Corporate ethics programs were rewritten. VW no longer bragged about being the biggest automaker, it now focused on being the most responsible. Still, scars remained. For many consumers, no apology or refund could undo the betrayal. For regulators, the scandal became a turning point. New testing protocols, like real driving emissions, RDE, and portable emissions measurement systems, PEMS, were adopted across the EU and beyond. Diesel, once thought to be a green solution, was largely phased out of future policies. For Volkswagen, the journey ahead was steep. But in an odd way, the scandal forced it to confront its worst instincts and try to become something better. Whether the transformation was born of guilt or strategy hardly mattered. The result was real: cleaner cars, clearer laws, and a more watchful public. The story of Dieselgate isn't just about software and emissions. It's about ambition unchecked by ethics. About the cost of short-term victory at the expense of long-term trust. And it's a reminder that even the most iconic giants can falter when the truth, long suppressed, finally demands to be heard. Volkswagen is still building cars. But now, it carries a heavier weight, the legacy of what it once tried to hide.